Is it just, it should let you share the screen now, inshallah. Also for this session, inshallah, it'll be myself jointly leading it, Mufti Zaid's jointly leading it with myself. I'll also be speaking and just be making a few relevant points that might be applicable to a few people, inshallah. A few more practical points, inshallah, as you're going through your journey of Umrah. Because usually we will start off with Umrah. Most of us, 80% of us, by the way, if not 90% of us, will be performing Hajj Tamattu', which is basically you're donning the Ihram for Umrah first. You're going to complete Umrah, whether you're traveling from the UK straight to Mecca or whether you're going to Medina first and then going from Medina to Mecca. And then, so you will definitely, most of you, I can guarantee you, will be going with the intention of doing Umrah first. You will finish your Umrah, which is what we're going to discuss in these sessions now. And then after that, you will leave the Ihram of Umrah. And just before the days of Hajj, or on the day of Hajj, essentially like from the 8th, you will start preparing by putting on your Ihram for Hajj. And that will, for some of you, will be in when you are in Aziziyah. But Mufti Zaid will inshallah take over now.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Nahmaduhu wa nusalli wa nusallim ala rasulihil kareem amma ba'd. So alhamdulillah, so far in our journey, we've just reached the airport. So we've got a long journey ahead of us. And let's just assume that there's long lines of people, and that's the bit that we least enjoy. However, this entire journey is a testing ground, as we mentioned previously. So we're not going to whine about the authorities or the number of checks we have to go through, because this will just decrease our status in the sight of Allah Ta'ala. So we first then head over to the counter, and we have our passports and our documents and everything, and we have it all checked, and then our suitcases are then weighed, and then they sent inside. So after this, we pass through security and we reach the duty-free section. And alhamdulillah, we now have a 6 hours journey, let's say, or maybe longer, maybe less, wherever we're from. And yes, we do know that some people won't be traveling to Mecca. Yeah, we do understand that some people might be traveling directly to Medina first. So if you are traveling to Medina first, then ihram, we don't need to worry about ihram at all if we're traveling to Medina, men or women. Ihram is only worn by the one who's intending Mecca. So for those intending Medina, Ihram won't be worn at all until we reach Medina. Then we'll stay in Medina for whatever duration we fixed. And then Ihram will be worn from Medina when we're traveling to Mecca. So when we're intending Mecca, only then. So for now, whoever's going to Medina, we don't need to worry about the Ihram. But for those going to Mecca, they obviously need to worry about their Ihram. So we mentioned earlier that we might want to wear our ihram from home, but without coming into the state of ihram, which was the key thing there. And we also learned that the two pieces of cloth that men wear, the two white pieces, we call them ihram loosely, but they don't mean you're in the state of ihram. We mentioned this yesterday. We'll only come into the state of ihram once we've made intention, if you remember, and we've also recited the talbiyah. Once you made intention, recited the talbiyah then. And we also might have touched on the fact that if we have a direct flight, then we might want to wear ihram from the airport or from home, or at least the lower garment, which we mentioned yesterday, because you might even soil your ihram in impurity if you're trying to just cramp in those toilets and wear the ihram. So it might be better to wear the bottom half from home. But obviously this is for your choice. But whoever has a transit flight. So what that means is whoever's going from here and they've got a stop over somewhere else, a stop somewhere before they reach Mecca, like for example, they've got a stop in Dubai or something, then they could maybe wear the ihram from home if they wanted to, or maybe they could even wear it at this stop, and maybe that might be more wise, that if they have enough time, once they've calculated it and whatever, then they could maybe wear it at this stopover place and then continue on from there. So ihram now. So just before we just discuss a little bit on ihram on the next slides as well. Yes, so as we just mentioned, direct flight and the transit flight. So if it's a direct flight, maybe from home might be the best option. Transit flight, maybe the stopover place, maybe that will be the better option. So ihram, just mentioning it now, for men anyway, it's two pieces of cloth that isn't stitched. So when we say it's not stitched, we're referring to the point that the ihram should be as uncomfortable as possible, as uncomfortable. So if it's just the two plain pieces of cloth, that's brilliant, and that's why it's meant to be. So it's something which we should constantly be worrying about, and we shouldn't try to make our ihram such that we're trying to then make sure that there's no way of it coming off or falling off. And obviously we don't want it to come off or whatever, so we might even tie a handbag or money bag. We might tie a money bag around our waist or something, but we don't want to tie this money bag around the waist to protect our money. We just we're tying this money bag let's say, to protect our money really, but we're not tying it for protecting our ihram, if that makes sense. So
Yeah.
we want to.
Mufti Zai, if I can interrupt you, sorry,
Ji,
to add that in the books of fiqh, they actually mention that the whole point of ihram, or throughout the entire journey, you should be worried about it falling off. I know you're going to be like, that's crazy. Are you actually telling us we should keep it as loose? No, we're not saying that. Ihram, like Mufti Zaid said, is meant to be uncomfortable. In fact, the fuqaha mention any ihram wherein you're too comfortable, you've really like you've clocked the ihram, if that makes sense in that slang language, in the sense that you don't, my ihram is perfect, no one needs to worry about it, I've got the best ihram, you don't. So that's not how it works. Technically, ihram is meant to be something that the Arabic, I'm forgetting the exact Arabic in the fuqaha's books, but they actually quite clearly say that it's something where you're constantly worried that it's going to fall off. But that doesn't mean you make it that loose that it actually does. So it's the balance, and there will be like kind of categories. So the moment you make it too comfortable, that's probably going to be a bit makruh. Now, if you now what Mufti Zaid will probably touch upon is that some of our scholars actually say that because in our community we don't wear what we call the lungi, or we don't wear that. We usually wear trousers. We're not used to. We don't have the, you could say, the skills of just wearing an ihram without any belt or nothing. So our scholars do allow a belt, but if you can do without it, that's probably a higher form of the ihram. But don't worry, if you have to wear a belt, you wear it. But it's like, don't make it ultra comfortable. Sorry, Mr. Zid.
ji. So um, as Mufti Muhammad Sahab mentioned, that our ihram should be something that we have to sort out time and time again. Obviously, we don't want it to fall off or anything, but it's something that we're constantly worrying about it. And this is the essence of Hajj and Umrah, where we're showing to Allah Ta'ala that we're in a very weak state in front of Allah Ta'ala, and we're dependent and we need Allah Ta'ala. So along with this, the ihram for men, the best is that it's white ihram, it's a white cloth. As for moving on to ihram for women, so this is important as well. So everything we mentioned so far was the ihram for men. So as for women, there's no specific clothing that a woman needs to wear for her ihram. So to put it very simply, the ihram of a woman is her normal day-to-day clothing. The clothing that a woman is wearing at this moment in time will suffice in it being her ihram, as long as it's covering the entire body, but it doesn't need to cover the hands and feet. Yes, in the state of ihram, a woman cannot let anything cover the face. So yeah, even the face needs to be uncovered in the state of ihram, and that's why many women to protect others and whatever. So they basically have a veil over their face, but they wear a cap underneath, which isn't covering the forehead as well, because that's part of the face. So a woman can't cover her face in the state of ihram. So
Yeah,
what they will do is,
sorry to
Ji,
interrupt, you, but you could wear a cap. I personally noticed that with my family and a few others, they found that quite uncomfortable. Well, if you go to like Bin Dawood, I call it Bin Dawood, but that place near, well, you'll know when you get there. So I'm already assuming people have been to Makkah, which I apologize for. When you go there and you ask around, they'll tell you that there's a supermarket called Bin Dawood. One thing that really helped a lot of the like women family members was a visor, which was a lot better visor. It does get a bit hot. And look, if it, I just want to warn you as well, that it's going to be really soaring heat. So don't force yourself. If you have to, like, what the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, the wives of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, what they would do is that when they were with women, they would keep that. You don't need to have it on. But when they were in, like, you could say, a place where in a non-mahram man could clearly see them, then they would put it on. Even that too, like on the day of Arafah, you might want to be a bit careful. You don't want to suffer from overheating, etc. Because even with that, you can end up getting in a bit of. But try as much as possible to wear a visor. I think that was a lot more comfortable for a lot of people. Sorry, myself.
So along with this, it's preferable and mustahab for a woman to wear colored clothing as the ihram instead of just white clothing. So we said it's best for men to wear white, whereas for a woman it's colored, and this is why many women they prefer to wear black color as the ihram, though it doesn't need to be black, but they prefer that. However, at the same time, she needs to ensure that the clothing is suitable and not something that's revealing or attracting the glances of others. And it's also permissible for a woman to wear jewelry in the state of ihram as well, and can wear any type of footwear. So we're going to come later, the things that aren't allowed for men in the state of ihram. But for a woman, in terms of footwear, they can wear anything. And even if she wants to cover the entire foot, that's completely fine as well.
And just
However,
sorry, Mufti Zaid,
Ji,
my mind's just jumping. Do you know in COVID when we wore those, like some people wore those really like fancy face coverings where it covers the full face. So even
Ji.
that could do for women, but obviously one that isn't see-through, that is quite comfortable. A few family members wore that, and they didn't find any heat or anything, and the face was not touched. It was actually just on the edge of the face, and it would be covering the face without actually touching the face. So a woman is not allowed to let anything touch her face, as in like a burqa or a niqab, so to speak, is not allowed. So you're gonna have to cover your face without it actually touching your skin. Sorry, apologies.
Ji. Um, yeah, and basically, so because we just mentioned that a woman can wear jewelry and stuff. However, it is important to mention that not every person that comes for Hajj, they want to they're there for a sincere intention. So there will be a few people there, maybe possibly, that will prey on the vulnerable and those who are unaware, and they'll try to even maybe steal their belongings and stuff. So the best carefree Hajj would be that a woman leaves her jewelry and everything at home if she can. And in the same manner as a man, a woman will then wear her ihram, whatever it is, like we just mentioned, and doesn't need to make intention and recite the talbiyah until reaching closer to the miqat. Once she reaches closer to the miqat, then she can come into the state of ihram. So as we mentioned, just wearing the cloth doesn't mean you're in the state of ihram.
Another thing with Zaid is that I would recommend the website Hajj Safe, wherein you can find a lot of these bags and belts and all of this that will help to make sure that everything stays safe, and they like really kind of like steel proof and stuff. No one will be able to steal it.
Okay. So in our scenario, just before boarding the plane, we choose to wear the ihram, let's imagine. But we've not decided that we're going to come into the state of ihram. So we enter the bathroom, we wear our ihram, and in fact, we should have actually practiced wearing the ihram. So men should have practiced wearing the ihram a few times at home. The main is the bottom bit. So we should try to practice a couple of times so we get used to it. And one of the possible wisdoms, as you can see on the screen, of wearing the ihram is that it reminds a person and the people around him of the inevitable, meaning the definite nature of death, where the ihram resembles a shroud, the kafan that we made to wear upon death. And men will remove their day-to-day clothing to substitute it with two pieces of ihram cloth. And at that moment, we'll imagine the time when our clothes will be removed and will be bathed before the burial. So we try to keep this in front of us. It comes in a hadith as well, as mentioned in Ad-Durarul Hisan, that وَمَن تَعَرَّى لِلَّهِ فِي الدُّنْيَا, whoever has unclothed himself for the sake of Allah Ta'ala in the dunya, in the world, then yuksal hulal, then he will be adorned with jewelry in the hereafter. So a person is essentially doing that. He's removing his clothing that Allah Ta'ala has given to him and substituting with the two cloths of ihram for men and whatever's specific for women. Um, and this clothing will be a means of honor for us in the day of on the day of judgment, inshallah. So we sacrifice our clothing for the clothing that Allah Ta'ala loves. That's what we're doing. So the clothing that we have, we're sacrificing it, and we're saying that Allah Ta'ala loves this clothing when we're going for Hajj, so we're going to wear this. And it's a sign that we have nothing when we stand in front of Allah Ta'ala except the quality of our heart. So even a king will be wearing the same as a slave, a master, as a servant. No material possessions matter in front of Allah Ta'ala. So just to dive a little bit deeper regarding the rulings in terms of ihram, the wajib and sunnah actions. So to put it very simply, as you can see the three conditions on the screen. So to come into the state of ihram, number one, you need to have to be a Muslim. Secondly, make intention and recite the talbiyah. So those three things make someone come into the state of ihram. Once you've done this, then you come into the state of ihram. And if someone's a Muslim, for example, automatically they don't come into the state of ihram. Same thing with intention. You need all three of the things. Thereafter, moving on to the wajib actions. Um, so moving on to the wajib actions, there's a few things, but just very quickly mentioning it. Once we've come into the state of ihram, there's a few things that are wajib. So number one, we need to cross the miqat, obviously. But if we're intending Makkah, then we can't cross the miqat without wearing the ihram for Hajj or Umrah, one of the two. And in our journey, because we're most probably doing Hajj tamattu, we'll be wearing the ihram of Umrah first. So even if a woman is menstruating, and this is a question women normally ask, so even if a woman is menstruating, she's going to cross the miqat, but she's intending Makkah. So what does she need to do? She needs to come into the state of ihram. Yes, she's not going to enter Masjid al-Haram or anything. She's not going to enter the masjid. She's not going to perform her umrah, but crossing the miqat, she needs to be in the state of ihram. She'll make intention. She'll recite the talbiyah as well. Then she'll go to Makkah. She'll go to her hotel. She won't enter Masjid al-Haram at all because entering in the state of menstruation, in menstruation, is not permissible. So she'll remain in the state of ihram, remain in the state of ihram until she's pure, and then she'll perform her umrah after that. But yes, she has to come into the state of ihram.
Mufti said for number two
Uh,
and number three, if we can just also just emphasize that when you come into the state of ihram, when you pray the 2 rakats of ihram, you put the clothes on. For the men I'm talking, when you put the clothes on, and for the women you just stay in your normal clothes and you pray your 2 rakats. Both men and women will pray 2 rakats, obviously if you're able to pray. For women, if you're not able to pray, you don't pray the 2 rakats. But when you, after you make the intention, reciting the talbiyah must be done with your tongue. So you can't just do it in your heart. You must say labbaik, Allahumma labbaik, labbaik la sharika lak, labbaik, innal hamda wan ni'mata lak wal mulk la sharika lak. You read it audibly so that you can hear it, and maybe even someone next to you would be able to hear it. That's a condition, as you can see for number two and number three. Intention in the heart, talbiyah upon the tongue, inshallah. Sorry.
yeah. And it's also, as you can see as well, it's wajib to stay away from the prohibitions of ihram as well. So when we've come into the state of ihram, we're in a special state of nobility, a special state of honor, while we're also showing our respect for the land where the Holy Quran was revealed. So from the list of things that are prohibited, we look at this a little bit carefully a little bit later. So first and foremost, it's not on the screen as such, but um, let me just see if I've no. So some of the things that aren't allowed: sexual intercourse and anything that can lead to it. Now, a lot of these things will not happen, so we don't need to worry about it too much. So that's something that most probably will not happen anyway. Committing any sins, so that's something we need to try to stay away from. Disputing and quarreling. Men to wear sewn clothing. So, like we said, sewn clothing meaning something that has seams. Basically, it basically means that something which isn't too comfortable wrapping around the entire body and it's firm on the entire body. Whereas a woman doesn't have these restrictions, by the way, as
Yeah.
we mentioned, they
So
can wear stitched, they can
some
wear patterned.
someone just asked that question again in the Q&A about belt. So we've just answered this just now. Essentially, look, a belt is considered, the more you add, the more it becomes makruh. So technically, the best ihram would be to have nothing. Literally just a lungi, like, you know, how we sometimes some people wear a lungi, literally just that and nothing. You just tie it and you make it with literally your own hands, and it's to one piece of cloth, and it's not even got a loop. Then the higher you kind of make yourself more comfortable, the kind of you're moving more away from the ethos of ihram. So if you make it a loop, it's still okay, don't worry, but you're heading more towards a problem. Then you add a belt to it, then you add another belt, or you probably add a pin to it. The most comfortable ihram is the one I would say that's probably a bit more problematic, but none of them are impermissible in that sense that the current ihrams that we see, most of them, the Velcro ones as well, they're okay. It's just the more you make yourself like kind of uncomfortable, the more you're heading into like kind of right direction. Sorry, Mufti Zaid, for constant interruption.
No, it's fine. So men also, they're not allowed to cover anything, cover their head or wrap anything around the head, because the face needs to basically, and the head as well, the topi, whatever. So they won't be wearing that in the state of ihram. And men and women both, they're not allowed to cover their face. So men aren't even allowed to cover their head, whereas women can cover their head, but not the face. And like we just mentioned about the veil, also men to they basically can't wear any footwear that will cover the protruding bone of the feet. Inshallah, we'll send a few pictures on the Telegram as well, and it should come in the PowerPoint a little bit later on. And they can't cover their ankles as well. So men can't cover the protruding bone on the foot, and they can't cover the ankles. So they need to find something appropriate in the state of ihram. Obviously, outside the state of ihram, they can wear anything. Whereas women, this doesn't apply to them. And then in the state of ihram, men and women, they can't apply perfume once they've come into the state of ihram. Then moving on. So after, let's say we now relieved ourselves and we've performed ablution, and now we're just about to board the plane. And once we board the plane, we find our seats and we may be presented with a refreshing towel, which tends to be the habit, and it's scented, by the way. So can we use that scented towel or not? So if we're not in the state of ihram, meaning we've not made intention, we've not recited the talbiyah, men or women, then it's completely fine, and we can basically use this scented towel because we're not in the state of ihram. But if we already came into the state of ihram for whatever reason, then we won't be able to use that, because we have to stay away from perfume or anything perfumed or scented. And then while we're on that plane, there may be a baby crying, which tends to be the habit, and there may be people talking loudly, and we may be by ourselves between two people, and we feel very uncomfortable. But this journey is teaching us to be humble and to lower on oneself and to forego our rights. So as we mentioned previously, most of the problems occur due to one's ego and feeling that I deserve such and such. So have good character, have good etiquette. So it comes in Shu'abul Iman as well, that the hadith that Sayyidul Qawmi fi Safari Khadimuhum, that the best person, the leader of a nation or people in a journey is the one that serves them. So be someone that does khidmat of people and serves others. Moving on to the sunnah. So all these thoughts are crossing our mind while we're either at the airport or we now boarded the plane and we're ready to wear our ihram, or we've worn our ihram or come into the state of ihram, let's say. Um, so when we're wearing our ihram, one of the things we've said as well, to be honest, we can skip a few things out. But previously, we've done this already, but it's sunnah to have a bath before we wore the ihram. So in our journey, we already had a bath from home, and that will suffice, inshallah. Um, and then we have intention that when we're having this bath, we're doing it to wear our ihram later on. And we mentioned as well that even if a woman was menstruating, to come into the state of ihram, it's sunnah to have this bath, even though she's menstruating or nifas, postnatal bleeding. Um, Thereafter, after this bath, we remove unwanted hand. We've talked about everything about ihram already. And then after having this bath, now we've come to the stage where we've worn the ihram, and we've already mentioned that it's best to have it in white color for men. And then we'll perform the 2 rak'at. So whenever we're ready now, we'll perform our 2 rak'at of nafil salah before we're ready to come into the state of ihram. And these 2 rak'at are nafil, um, and they can be performed anywhere really. So many people, they might perform these 2 rak'at on the plane, particularly Saudi Airlines, but because of the increasing number of pilgrims each year, it might be difficult to perform it on the plane. Especially if we decide to do this just before reaching the miqat. So that's why we should prepare in advance and maybe even perform these 2 rakat at the airport. And it's mustahab after performing these 2 rakats of ihram to come into the state of ihram as soon as possible. So once we've prayed, it's mustahab too. So we can delay if we want to, if there's a need or whatever. But it's mustahab to perform these 2 rakat of ihram, which is nafal, optional, and then come into the state of ihram straight away. And in the end, if we don't get a chance to perform these 2 rakat due to lack of time or whatever other reason, it's completely fine because these were nafal rakat. So it's completely fine, and you can still come into the state of ihram.
As Mufti Zaid mentioned, you got transit and you're stopping in Cairo, for example, on the way, and then you're going to Mecca. Pray in Cairo, enter the state of Ihram, I would say, in Cairo, because you've only got, I don't know how many hours, but a 4 or 5 hour flight to Mecca, to Jeddah. So you'd rather just enter the state of Ihram, or if you want to at least pray the 2 rakats and then enter the state of Ihram on your flight towards Jeddah.
And it's also sunnah to apply perfume on one's body, one's clothes, but in such a manner that it doesn't leave a stain before coming into the state of ihram. Before coming into the state of ihram, yeah, because in the state of ihram we're not allowed to do that. So before coming into the state of ihram, you can apply perfume on the body or clothes, but in such a manner that it doesn't leave a stain.
And
So it
probably
comes as well.
another chance to just reiterate, ihram is a state, not just the clothes. You could have the clothes on and still not be in that state of ihram. If you only come into a state once you make the intention and you recite the talbiyah.
And so Allama Turibishli rahmatullah alayhi, he writes in Matlabun Nasik that Hazrat Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he did not see it permissible for the pilgrim to apply perfume before his ihram, such that the fragrance would then remain or the stain would remain on him, because then a person wouldn't be able to tell later on, has something come on him after ihram or was it before ihram. So because of that, as one is Muawiyah radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he would order that the traces of perfume that the pilgrim has applied before ihram to be washed off him if there are any traces, um, because a person won't be able to differentiate later on whether fragrance has been applied then, if it was after the state of ihram or before the state of ihram. Then both men and women who are
We just had a question with regards to these 2 units of ihram. Can you read them in a makruh time? And better not to. You shouldn't, basically, not in a makruh time. Try to read it in outside of makruh time. Definitely not the 3 times where in like sunrise, midday, and sunset. Definitely not in those times, and not even in the other makruh times as well, because they are nafil.
and basically both men and women that aren't menstruating, they will obviously perform those 2 rakat of ihram like we mentioned. And in those 2 rakat of ihram which are nafil, so those 2 rakat, the head will be covered. So men will cover the head because they're not in the state of ihram yet. and it's best for them, mustahab for them to recite Surah Kafirun, Qul Ya Ayyuhal Kafirun in the first rak'at with Surah Fatiha, of course. And in the second rak'at, they recite Surah Ikhlas, Qul Huwallahu Ahad, the entire surah, along with Surah Fatiha, of course. So it's mustahab to recite that. Of course, a person can recite anything else. And after this, these two rak'at, um, now, like we said, it's mustahab to come into the state of ihram as soon as possible. And this two rakat can be performed on the transit flight. If you're going to stop somewhere else, you can perform them there. And men will ensure, after performing the two rakat, that the head is now uncovered, because men can't cover their hair in the state of ihram. So now they're going to come into the state of ihram. We're going to come into the state of ihram. So we're going to ensure nothing is covering our head. Along with that, we're going to ensure that our tarsal bone as well of the feet is uncovered. And we're going to remove anything touching the head, as we mentioned. And women will ensure nothing is covering their face except that cap, which we said, which creates a gap between the veil and the face. And it would be best to come into the state of ihram a little bit before the miqat. So just in case, because we'll never be able to tell really have we actually gone past if you're going to delay it till the last moment. So a little while earlier, we'll want to come into the state of ihram, maybe half an hour, maybe 45 minutes.
Usually Muslim
Uh,
airlines will kind of make an announcement that we're about to come to the miqat in about half an hour or something. But I just say just be safe and just put it on about well before that announcement is made as well, if you're okay with it. Sorry, Mufti Zaid, apologies for the constant interruption.
no, 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 no. And then just before we make intention, so now we're completely ready to come into the state of ihram on this plane. And just before we make the intention, it's always good to let us think about the reason why we've invested all this money and all this time and all this energy. So we'll keep having these regular checks of our intention, and this will help us when things frustrate us on this journey, which they definitely will. This will basically help us, and we don't want to utter anything or do anything which destroys our reward of this Hajj and Umrah. So that Nafi' bin Jubair rahmatullahi alayhi was intending to once go to a janazah namaz. So the people asked him whether he was ready to leave. So he said to them, Kama anta hatta anwi. Yeah, just stay how you are until I make intention. So he was heading to a janazah salah, but he told them just wait for a while. And they just waited, and he thought for a while, and he pondered, and then he departed for the janazah namaz. So in that time, he basically was rectifying his intention. And along with that as well, um, a person after making the intention, now he's ready to come into the state of ihram. So he's going to make intention that Allahumma, and he doesn't need to say this in Arabic. You can say it with, you can say in any language really, but it might be better to understand or just know what the Arabic is. Allahumma inni uridul umrata. Allahumma inni uridul umrata. Oh Allah, I intend umrah. Fayassirha li. So make it easy for me. Fayassirha li wa taqabbalha minni. And accept it from me. So it's mustahab to recite this, make this intention with one's tongue as well as the heart. The heart is the main, but it's mustahab to recite it with the tongue as well. And it's mustahab to make this intention as soon as we perform the two rakat nafal of ihram. And this intention can be made in any language and doesn't need to be Arabic, doesn't need to even be verbalized really, but it's mustahab to say it with the tongue as well, this intention. So the one performing Hajj Ifrad, if someone is performing Hajj Ifrad, they'll make intention of just Hajj. So in our intention was Umrah as well, because we're performing Umrah first. Hajj Ifrad will make intention of Hajj. A Mutamatti', someone doing Tamattu, which will be most of us, will be Umrah. They'll make intention of Umrah. And the Qarin, the one performing Hajj Qiran, he'll make intention for both Umrah and Hajj.
So
Then after doing
someone doing Hajj Ifrad, technically they won't be leaving their ihram until the entire process of Hajj is finished. And someone doing Qiran will actually do Umrah and still not leave the state of ihram. They will keep the clothes on all the way until Hajj is finished, because they're joining Hajj and Umrah together. But we're doing Tamattu. We're going to take it step by step. We're going to do Umrah first, then leave ihram. We'll cut our hair, put our normal clothes on. We'll be roaming around Makkah like normal. And then we'll re-enter Ihram the days before Hajj. And that's the idea of tamattu. You're taking benefit of two actions of worship in one journey, but you're not joining them into one Ihram. Sorry.
then we'll basically, so once we've made our intention, now we'll be ready to make the talbiyah. So reciting the talbiyah once is fard, and will now make one in the state of ihram. So we have to do those things. So we're Muslim already, alhamdulillah, and then intention, and then talbiyah. So it's mustahab to recite the talbiyah thrice, but the first one is necessary, and a person has to actually say the words. Men will recite it loudly, but it doesn't mean that it's so loud that you start disturbing others, particularly on the plane, because There'll be others on the plane, maybe not even intending Makkah, or they may not even be Muslims. So it would be inappropriate to scream the talbiyah and to disturb others. So that's important as well. And as for women, they'll recite the talbiyah quietly, but enough that they can hear themselves. If someone doesn't know the talbiyah, just in case, then number one, they should try to learn it. So they've got plenty of time now till the days of Hajj or till they depart for their journey to learn it. If they still can't learn it, then any form of dhikr will suffice. So just saying Alhamdulillah will be enough to make one in the state of Ihram. So Qasim bin Muhammad, rahmatullahi alayhi, was one of the great fuqaha, one of the 7 great fuqaha of Medina, and he was the nephew of Hazrat Aisha radiallahu anha. He would say as well that it's mustahab for a pilgrim, someone going on Hajj, that when he completes his talbiyah, then he recites durood on Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam as well. So a person should try to maybe recite durood as well, mustahab for him, after reciting the talbiyah, which is extra. A person is now in the state of ihram, but anything extra, he can recite that on the screen as well. As you can see, there's another dua. So it's mustahab to recite this dua as well, which is Allahumma inni as'aluka ridaka wal jannah. O Allah, I ask you for your pleasure and paradise. Wa a'udhu bika min sakhatika wan nar. And I seek refuge in you from your anger and the fire. Bi rahmatika ya arhamar rahimin. By your mercy, or the most merciful. So while our Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam would be walking for Hajj, the trees and the stones would actually be calling out to him. So in the same manner, inside our Hajj journey, um, the stones and the hills are reciting the talbiyah along with us. So when we're reciting it comes in the hadith of Tirmidhi Sharif as well, that ma min muslimin yulabbi, that no Muslim raises his voice with talbiyah except illa labba man an yaminihi wa shimalihi, except everything on his right and left, they all say talbiyah with him, min hajar aw shajar. So from the stones and the trees, they all basically do talbiyah along with him. So this is why we should try to recite as much of talbiyah as possible when climbing a hill. As I mentioned, it's mustahab when descending from a hill, when walking and lying down. And the talbiyah is labbaik Allahumma labbaik, labbaik la sharika laka labbaik, innal hamda wan ni'mata laka wal mulk, la sharika lak. So when we're walking, when we're lying down, when we're standing up, waking up in the afternoon, in the evening, when we're meeting people, when we're taking a leave from people, all of this, it's sunnah. It's a sunnah thing to do, to recite the talbiyah, and it now becomes a distinguishing and like something devotional prayer dedicated for Hajj and Umrah. But it's very important that we don't disturb anyone. We should be reciting the talbiyah, but this doesn't mean we're enforcing the talbiyah on others. There will be people resting, there will be people tired. So it's important to remember that it's disliked to actually chant the talbiyah in groups. Reciting talbiyah is something which should be done individually, not something which should be chanted together. So it can sound nice, but it's better to do so individually than in groups.
Yeah, this is especially true when you're going from Medina to Makkah, where it's a 5-hour journey. People might go to sleep, and then you'll still have some people screaming the talbiyah. This is completely incorrect. Even sometimes during the 5 days of Hajj, people will be doing it at night time in Mina, and people are sleeping. This is inappropriate. We shouldn't be disturbing people.
And the word talbiyah itself, it means to affirm. So when we recite the talbiyah, we're affirming and responding to the call of Ibrahim alayhi salam. So Ibrahim alayhi salam, he was ordered by Allah Ta'ala to call the people to Hajj. So Allah Ta'ala says in the Quran as well, وَأَذِّن فِي النَّاسِ بِالْحَجِّ, and call and announce to the people regarding Hajj. So Hazrat Ibrahim alayhi salam, he asked Allah Ta'ala that, oh Allah, how is my call going to reach everywhere? As mentioned in Mustadrak of Imam Hakim rahmatullahi alayhi. So Allah Ta'ala said to him, Nadi wa alayna al-balagh, that you call out and its dissemination is upon us. And then he ascended the maqam Ibrahim, and that elevated him above all the mountains. And the whole earth was then brought to his feet until he covered his fingers with his ears, and then as if giving the adhan, and he called out while addressing the east and the west. And he said that, Ya ayyuhan nas, O people, Inna rabbakum qad ittakhadha baytan, that indeed Allah Ta'ala has chosen his special house, so do Hajj of it. And thereafter, when we recite the talbiyah now, we're replying to this call of Ibrahim alayhi salam, and we should be thinking that we've accepted the invitation of Allah Ta'ala and Ibrahim alayhi salam. And we'll also try to think as if we're coming out of our graves and we're heading towards the place of reckoning. And while in the state of ihram, as it came previously as well, in the state of ihram, it's completely fine for a person to wear, let's say, to wear a watch, wear glasses, sunglasses, carry a backpack, shade oneself with an umbrella. changing or washing one's ihram. So you can change and wash one's ihram. You can have a bath if you need to. You can even use a blanket to cover oneself. So even men, they can cover their feet. Yes, in terms of footwear, they can't cover the ankles and protruding bone. But otherwise, if you're covering yourself with a blanket, that's fine to cover that as well. So the entire foot can be covered really for a man. Having a bath, as we mentioned, holding one's wife at times of need, this is completely fine as well. And it's permissible for women to wear jewelry as well. Moving on to
You
the
might,
slide of how to wear the ihram.
although I don't think anyone wears it, but the only thing I would say you shouldn't wear is those umbrellas that are stuck to your head. Don't get one of those. That's not going to be permissible. But holding an umbrella is going to be fine. And in fact, I would recommend it in those 5 days. At some points, it might be good, especially on the day of Arafah. If you're going outside and you're making dua, it would be good, inshallah.
So in the above manner, just let's say we're in the state of ihram. So some of the question that we might be having at this time is, how do we even wear the ihram? So to put it very simply, women, once again, to just reiterate, that they have their usual clothing as long as it's covering the entire body except the hands and feet, which don't really need to be covered. Whereas the face can't be covered in the state of ihram. But as we mentioned, the plan on what to do with that, about hanging the veil. And along with this, we said that it's best for them to wear colored clothing. And as for men, the upper garment tends to be very easy, while the bottom garment seems to be quite challenging. So the best way to wear the bottom garment, as you can see in picture number 1 on the left side of the screen, is, and I don't think he's doing that, but the best thing would be to spread one's legs out a little bit, just as we would stand in salah, but legs much wider apart. And then we'll take that lower garment and we'll wrap it around the bottom half of our body, from the navel till the ankle. So our ihram won't be below the ankles. Our ihram has to be above the ankles. Um, and basically that's how we'll tie it. And it would be better um, to wrap the ihram even a little bit higher. So maybe even cover the navel a little bit higher, because we'll be rolling it down from the top. And the reason why we have to spread the legs, by the way, is because we don't want the ihram to become too tight, or otherwise it'll become uncomfortable and we won't be able to walk with long strides, especially during our Umrah. So that's the bottom half, to be honest, completed. And as we said, if you're going to tie something or a pouch or something, tie it with the intention that it's for protecting money more than trying to hold the ihram together, which is completely fine as well. And after that, that might be something that we need to get used to. So best would be try this a few times before setting off for Umrah. And then the top bit is something we could maybe wear even in the plane later on. And that's quite easy. So the top half will be worn just very simply, that you'll take most of the ihram over the right shoulder on top of it, and then we'll place it over the left shoulder. So most of the ihram will be hanging over the left shoulder now. And when we're wearing this ihram, we'll be contemplating on the thought that perhaps these two pieces of cloth will become our shroud. So we'll try to think of these things. We've already touched on this. What if I'm going to Medina? So to be honest, we all know the answer to this. If we're going to Medina, do we need to wear the ihram? Of course, we don't need to wear the ihram, because we'll only be wearing the ihram when we're intending Mecca. So we'll stay in Medina. When we're going, then a place called Dhul Hulayfa. We'll talk about this a little bit later on. So that Dhul Hulayfa, when we come to the miqats, that we'll basically wear it from there. Now, coming on to the question, what are the miqat? All this time we've been talking about the miqat, and it might be something that we've never ever come across. So just imagine, just put into perspective, that we're sitting on the plane and we're trying to fall asleep, and then the thought crosses our mind regarding the term miqat and the wisdom behind miqat. But what is this miqat? If you take a look at the screen as well, there's these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 points. So what does this term miqat even mean? So it can be translated as boundary points or geographical points, and they've been designated and chosen as the boundary of a sacred area when traveling to Haram. So they placed at varying distances, as you can see. They're not all in one location. They're quite spread out, and they form an invisible boundary which you can't see. And Nabi Sallallahu Alayhi Wasallam, he stipulated these certain points for anyone intending Haram, anyone intending Makkah. So before reaching this sacred area, we must be in the state that Allah Ta'ala loves, because no one can enter this state if they're intending Makkah without following a certain code of conduct. So it's permissible to come into the state of Ihram from the miqat, because obviously we're going through plane, it's impossible to know exactly when we're crossing the miqat. So that's why it's better to come into ihram maybe half an hour, maybe 45 minutes, maybe an hour, maybe even before that if you need to. before actually crossing the miqat. So there are 5 miqat, as you can see on the screen. Dhul Hulayfa, and Dhul Hulayfa will come time and time again for the people of Medina or anyone coming from the direction of Medina. And it's basically the furthest miqat from Mecca. And Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, when he came, obviously Medina is above Mecca. So when Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam came, then he basically wore his ihram for Umrah and Hajj from from basically this point, from Dhul Hulayfa. And it was basically a certain type of tree known as mimosa tree or something along those lines. And Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, he wore his ihram from there, and that's why this Dhul Hulayfa Masjid is known as Masjid al-Shajara as well. Okay, and the area now is known as Abiyar Ali as well, with no connection to Hazrat Ali radiallahu anh. But basically, that's one miqat, especially when we're coming from Medina, then this will be the miqat that we'll wear our ihram at. Then you have Juhfa.
Even with
Ji.
those who are coming from Medina, because we did that last year. We went Medina first, and then we went from Medina to Makkah. The tour guides will recommend, and I would highly recommend you just listen to them. They will tell you to just put the ihram on from Medina, literally from Medina, because they won't be doing any stopping in Dhul Hulayfa. Dhul Hulayfa is very close to Medina Munawwara. It's literally you just go past Medina and it's right there, Dhul Hulayfa. It's not too far out. So they won't be stopping there. So they'll tell you just wear it from your hotel in Medina and just listen to them and follow their instructions. They know what they're doing. So, inshallah, that's just something I just want to mention.
Ji. Then we have Juhfa, as you can see on the screen as well, on the northwest of Mecca, on the coast of the Red Sea. Then you have Qarnul Manazil. It's located on the east of Mecca, and it's a miqat for those coming from Qatar or Bahrain and Iran. Then we have Yalamlam. It's located on the south of Mecca, and it's a miqat for those that are from Yemen or other places like Somalia. And that Irq is located on the northeast of Mecca. So we have these points. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. G. So
And
there's these five miqat points.
it might be just good to mention that this isn't the boundaries of Haram. This is the boundaries of the Miqat. Haram is a circle that's more inside, which Mufti Zaid will show us just very soon. It's inside of Miqat, you get the Haram, which we're going to come to.
G. So the widest bit is the miqat. Then we get a little bit smaller, which will be the haram after that. But inshallah, that will come on the next few slides. So the pilgrim who fails to wear, anyone going for Hajj Umrah, anyone who fails to wear the ihram before crossing this miqat, they need to return to the nearest miqat, whatever that is, or they can continue without the ihram and then they'll have to basically wear it whenever inside the miqat, but they'll have to give dam. So in other words, they'll have to give a penalty. So in other words, we have to wear our ihram before crossing this, and inshallah we will most probably do this anyway because of the emphasis that's been put on this.
Not particularly during Hajj, but sometimes when people go Makkah and they're there for a few days, they get a temptation to go to Ta'if or something. Remember, Ta'if is outside of Miqat. So if you're going to go Ta'if and you're going to come back in, you're going to have to come back in with Ihram and you're going to have to do an Umrah, etc. So just be wary of if you're planning to travel anywhere beyond Makkah or you're planning to go to Jeddah or something like that. Jeddah is, I guess, just inside the Miqat, so you should be all right. But just be careful if you're going to do any traveling. Most people don't anyway because you're resting in preparation for Hajj.
Ji. And one of the possible wisdoms of the miqat is it's showing us that we're entering a sacred land now, which is worthy of honor and worthy of respect. So the image of a person entering a courtroom or the court of a king, that comes in front of us, that we have to show a level of decorum, a level of obedience. So we implicitly also learn that through this miqat, no matter how much money we have or sort of clothes we have or we usually wear, we are servants of Allah Ta'ala, and Allah Ta'ala can command and make impermissible whatever permissible thing there was. So some things were permissible on us, but as soon as we came into the state of ihram, because Allah Ta'ala is said, now we're staying away from those things. And miqat also creates unity, because every person, no matter who they are or where they are, they'll wear their ihram from these designated points. So obviously before that, but they've got until these points. So imagine we had to wear our ihram from home. Imagine that was the ruling. Then how difficult would it be based on how far we live, and we'll be in ihram for 24 hours, more than that, for example. So there's a lot of wisdom in having these miqat. Then on the next slide, so imagine we're nearly falling asleep on the plane and we've come into the state of ihram already, and then the thought comes into our mind that there's two types of miqat. You have miqat zamani and you have miqat makani. So miqat zamani refers to the miqat, zamana means time. So it refers to the miqat or the boundary which has got to do with time. So in other words, what time should we wear our ihram? So we previously mentioned the ihram for Hajj Tamattu, Hajj Qiran, Hajj Ifrad can only be worn during the months of Hajj, which are Shawwal, Dhul Qa'dah, and the first 10 days of Dhul Hijjah. So to wear one's ihram of Hajj, Umrah, whatever it is, that Hajj Tamattu, Ifrad, or Qiran, prior to these months would be makruh tahrimi. So we can't do any of the actions of Hajj or even this Umrah of Hajj that we're doing prior to the months of Hajj, let's say in Ramadan or something, because that wouldn't count for this Hajj Tamattu, Qiran, or Ifrad that we're doing. And um, so that's basically Miqat Zamani. We're doing that anyway. So we're going for Hajj after, it's right now Shawwal, the 30th of Shawwal or the 1st of Dhul Qa'dah or something. So to be honest, the months of Hajj have begun. And then you have Miqat Makani, which is what we've just talked about, the boundary, the place, and the 5 Miqat. And we've talked about them as well. Just something important, maybe we want to just highlight that if someone who lives outside the Miqat, then for him is these Miqat. So he needs to wear ihram if he's intending Makkah or she's intending Makkah before, even if a woman's menstruating, by the way, and she's intending Makkah haram, she will come into the state of ihram before reaching the miqat. But for someone who lives within the miqat, so if we just go back to that picture, so someone who lives within this red area, someone who lives in Jeddah, for example, or within the red area, so that basically that area is known as the hill area. So it's hill, and then haram is more closer to Makkah and a bit bigger than Makkah as it is. So whoever lives basically in this red area and not as close to Makkah, known as the Haram area. We'll talk about that a little bit later as well. Whoever lives in Hill, their ihram is from anywhere in Hill, so even from their homes. So in other words, if someone lives in Jeddah, then their ihram for Hajj or Umrah will be from their homes, and they don't need to travel to Miqat to wear their ihram. And if someone lives in Haram, which is Makkah and the outskirts of Makkah, whoever lives inside Haram, for example, us, when we go and we perform our Umrah and we're staying in our hotel, so now we're classed as people that are part of Haram and we're in our hotel room or whatever. And for us, our Ihram for Hajj is anywhere in Haram. So we'll just wear it from our hotel because it most probably will be in Haram. Um, and that's the general habit. But for Umrah, the ihram for someone who's living in Haram, for Umrah, their ihram will be from Hill. So they need to travel from somewhere. So if we're living somewhere here inside, for Umrah, we travel somewhere in Hill, which is the red area, all the way to the miqat. So for Umrah, we don't need to travel all the way to the miqat. We'll basically travel somewhere. So that's why many people they travel to Tan'im, and that's the best place for someone who lives in Haram to go to wear their ihram for Umrah again if they decide to perform another Umrah. And it's the closest basically place to go
What
to. It's also
what
known as Masjid Aisha.
Masjid Aisha. I was just going to mention that. What we famously know as
Mm.
Masjid Aisha. Why do we go there when we're doing Umrah? It's because we've become part of the Meccans. We are literally living in Mecca for that period then. And then if we want to do an Umrah, we need to go to the edge of the Haram. The edge of the Haram will be somewhere here, and that's going to be Hill. But that's going to be Masjid Aisha, and then we come back in, and that's for Umrah. That's what you have to do. But we are coming right now from the outside of Miqat, so this doesn't apply to us. We're not part of Makkah yet. Uh, we just got a We've just got a question here from someone. We'll answer it inshallah at the end of the session.
Ji. So of course on this Hajj journey anything can happen, and if we have our children with us who may be close to the age of puberty or they've not become baligha just yet, but they're very close to or they've reached that age, and it so happens that they become mature. So it might be important just to very quickly just go through this. If they become mature on this journey of Hajj or Umrah that we're going on the plane, for example, or before crossing the miqat, then obviously they'll clean any impurity, whatever, they'll have their bath, and they'll basically come into the state of ihram because it's before the miqat. However, if they become baligha after crossing the miqat, then they won't need to go back to the miqat because it's something which usually doesn't happen, and it might be actually quite shocking for them anyway, then to make them come all the way back to the miqat. So because of that, they'll just wear their ihram, make their intention, and recite the talbiyah after having their bath. They'll do that from the place they're at, even after the miqat. So for them, it's a exception basically, and they won't need to give any penalty. So in the state of Ihram, the pious scholars would actually be very, very happy and they'd be very thankful to Allah Ta'ala for granting them the opportunity to go for Hajj and go for Umrah. And we could have been doing anything at that moment or not even going for Hajj, for example, but nothing is as great as heading towards the lands of mercy, the lands of blessings. And this is one of the reasons why when we even go to meet people, that have returned from Hajj or they've returned from Umrah, we don't just meet them because we just want to drink Zamzam and eat their kajur, but it's because to shake their hands as well with people that have spent time in Mecca and Medina as the mercy of Allah Ta'ala has directly touched their hearts and their bodies as well. And scholars would sing and say these poetry basically out of happiness. But we can just skip this, and you can go back to the slides if you really want to memorize that.
Yeah, there's a Arabic nasheed of those poetry, which inshallah I'll send. It's nice to have that nasheed on when you're about to go into ihram and you're coming on the way to Makkah. I'll send it inshallah on the group.
So now it's the we're in the state of ihram, and now we come to those things which we have to avoid and we cannot do. So this is something which we tend to, maybe this is what we concentrate on. But like we said, a lot of these things will just not happen. So it's just good to familiarize ourselves with it. But we don't want to become overly cautious as well and ruin our Hajj experience by just constantly going through them and just being too cautious, basically. And then we don't really concentrate on the spiritual aspect of our Hajj. So these things are impermissible. But as you'll see as well, many of them we won't be doing, inshallah. So firstly, that which was not allowed before ihram, obviously that will not be allowed in ihram, and it'll actually become more severe if it's committed, because we're now in a more spiritual state and we're going to perform a great action obedience. So we'll try to avoid backbiting. It wasn't allowed previously, but in the state of ihram, it's worse. Insulting is worse now. Doing any deeds that will decrease our reward, basically. So in our journey, we'll be tired, and things will come in front of us that will test us, but we'll smile and we'll continue ahead, and we won't insult anyone, and we won't basically try to hurt anyone. And the reason why backbiting and one of the wisdoms or something we should understand, and insulting, why that's not allowed in the state of ihram, is because the pilgrims, as for yourself as well, and all of us, all the pilgrims are the guests of Allah Ta'ala. And if we quarrel with them, if we fight with them, then a person is worthy of the wrath of Allah Ta'ala, who's the host. Imagine, even if a pilgrim were to fight or argue with someone else, then he's not considered a true lover of Allah Ta'ala, because he's hurting others and he's seeking his own personal comfort, his own name, his own reputation. So imagine a friend invited you to his home or her home, and then you start having a fight with someone else just because they insulted you. So the wiser and more intelligent person would be the one who forgoes his right, even if someone insulted him, because he understands that this is the home of such and such a person, and it's inappropriate to become frustrated and infuriated in a home of such someone else other than ourselves. So if we can't control ourselves even on this journey, then we'll return back home and we won't have changed and we won't have become better.
Mufti said this might be a good
Secondly,
opportunity to just touch on the question that the person has asked, because it's directly related to what you said, which is, can you explain why the ihram should be uncomfortable? You don't want it to fall off or keep your mind occupied on your ihram all during days of Hajj. So it's connected to what you said about having to make patience. There will be a lot of difficulties during Hajj, and that's the point. So that connects to the ihram idea. Why do we want it to be uncomfortable? So the author of Bada'i Sana'i Alama Kasani mentions that ihram is a complete position that is the contrary of what we wear on a day-to-day basis. So if you're wearing your normal clothes, why do you wear your normal clothes? Because they don't fall off. So in ihram, we don't want it to fall off. We know we're meant to cover our satar, but we don't want it to become overly comfortable. Why? And this is something that I would advise, and this is literally what I told my family as well. Write this onto your forehead, because it's a hadith of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Before you go into the state of ihram, before you go for Hajj, even maybe as you're preparing for Hajj, write this on your forehead. Innamal ajru ala qadri nasab. Indeed, your reward is dependent upon the difficulty you go through. The more difficulty you go through, the more the reward. That's what Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam told Aisha radiallahu anha. Innamal ajru ala qadri nasab. So the more challenges, some people lose their phones, some people don't have a hotel booking ready, and the hotel room tells them, the hotel tells them, we've not got a room for you guys, sorry. And everyone else has got a luxurious room, everyone's got their spouses with them, and you're struggling. Their Hajj is probably a lot closer to, inshallah, the Hajj of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And inshallah, the more difficulties you go through in Hajj, not to say you should want them or you should try to put yourself through them, but inshallah, the greater the reward. Sorry, Mufti Zaid, if you want to just finish off this slide and then we can stop it.
so secondly, a person, he needs to avoid, or it's impermissible anyway, intercourse with one's spouse, even things such as kissing and embracing or lustful talks, all of this, or basically, in other words, anything that must lead or anything that leads to intercourse or may lead, basically all of that must be avoided, unless there's a genuine need of touching, for example, holding one's spouse's hand due to crowds or something. So again, that's something that obviously in the state of ihram we'd be avoiding. Thereafter, the third point, very quickly, is hunting animals, or even aiding a hunter. Again, this is something which we will not be doing. And obviously, this doesn't mean that we're not allowed to eat meat. Yeah, we can eat meat, but this is basically hunting animals of in the state of ihram. So that's something we can't be doing as well. Thereafter, intentionally removing hair from the body, whether through plucking or shaving or any other way. So again, this is something we're not going to be doing intentionally. We know in the state of ihram, so we're not going to do that. Yeah, if a hair falls off by itself, such as if we do wudu and it falls off, or if we're having a bath and it falls off, then this is overlooked because this was beyond our control. Thereafter, just finally, just ending on this last point, inshallah, the
Mufti Zaid,
clipping one's nails.
Mufti Zaid, we could end with this clipping of the nails, and then we can
Yeah.
stop there, inshallah.
So this is, to be honest, quite straightforward. Obviously, clipping the nails, hands, feet, that's not allowed as well, prohibited. So this is something we should have done prior to coming to the state of ihram. Again, this is easily avoidable. So all these things on this slide, to be honest, we'll be avoiding anyway. There's a few other things, inshallah, we'll look at that tomorrow.
And just in regards to the writing on the forehead, I just realized, I hope no one's wondering whether you actually physically write it. I'm just saying write it with your finger. And what I would do is, especially when the suitcases come out, because there's absolute chaos and everyone, your own spouse might get angry at you. Oh, I told you to stand there. You never listened to me. And, you just, what are you doing? And look, everyone's getting their suitcase and you just, so in those moments, you want to just remind your spouse, what have you got written on your forehead? إِنَّمَا الْأَجْرُ عَلَى قَدْرِ النَّصَبِ. Indeed, your reward is dependent upon your difficulty. So just stay calm, stay patient. As much as you, even on the day of Arafah, the food might not be fantastic. I can warn you just now. You might not get brilliant food and it's sweltering heat and you want to eat and you might want to feel on إِنَّمَا الْأَجْرُ عَلَى قَدْرِ النَّصَبِ. Indeed, your reward is dependent upon the difficulty you go through. So it will be a difficult journey, but you'll love it and you'll enjoy it at the end of it, inshallah. Inshallah, we'll continue tomorrow at the same time. And I will put that, I know someone asked for me to mention that hadith. I will actually put that full hadith with the translation on the Telegram group, inshallah. Someone's asking, we are doing Hajj Quran, would it be permissible to have a shower after Tawaf and Sa'i before going to Mina? Yeah, you're allowed to have a shower, you're allowed to have a bath, mashallah, and inshallah, hopefully your Hajj Quran goes well. That's the hardest one to do. So mashallah, Allah accept it. Jazakumullah khairan, inshallah, we continue tomorrow. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.